opened a new room in their art form.
The analogy is closer if I say Shakespeare, only because if you said like Charlie Parker or something, who came along and truly revolutionized jazz, it wasn't that after Ray Robinson, every boxer, like after Charlie Parker, every saxophone player played Charlie Parker. Whereas with Ray Robinson, it was more like suddenly there came along someone who was just sort of up here.
Muhammad Ali was greatly influenced by Ray Robinson, and would freely admit that.
Muhammad Ali is an homage to Ray Robinson. Watching Ali fight, you saw someone aspiring to be Ray Robinson. He was the heavyweight Sugar Ray Robinson.
Muhammad started wearing, the same kind of stuff, and he wanted to dance like Sugar Ray. And he would say it a lot in his training. This is where Sugar Ray do it, and he'd go for that body thing.
A few weeks after the third fight with LaMotta, he was inducted into the Army. He was assigned to the Joe Louis Troop, which was a group of boxers headed, of course, by the heavyweight champion that toured around Army bases in the United States trying to foster good relationships between the black and the white troops. But obviously down south they had a different ideal of what was a good relationship, because when they got to Mississippi, Ray discovered that the black troops were not allowed to come to see the exhibition. So what he did is he confronted the general at the post and said if there weren't any black troops there, there wouldn't be any exhibition. So a quick call to the War Department, and that was another victory for Ray Robinson.
The Army decided to send the group overseas because they were having great racial problems, particularly in England. And Mr. Robinson decided that was not for him. So when the group left the port of embarkation, Ray was among those missing.
He was soon going to be shipped out to Europe, but Robinson didn't want to go. He was informed that if he did not follow orders, he could be court-martialed and punished. What eventually happened is Ray Robinson claimed to have fallen down the stairs.
Ray's story was that he tripped, fell downstairs, had amnesia, woke up in an Army hospital in Staten Island, and that led to his discharge. Now that has always been Ray's story. Not everyone agrees with that story. Dan Parker in the Daily Mirror wrote that Ray had, in a sense, jumped ship, and that became the popular acceptance of what happened.
Ray was honorably discharged, which is a point that he always brought up whenever his military career was questioned. But there is definitely some question there as exactly what happened. When Ray was discharged from the Army, he had been widely recognized as the best welterweight in the world for a long time, but he couldn't get a title shot. And basically, I think the reason he couldn't get a title shot is that, quote-unquote, he would have darkened the division. He would have been a black fighter who could have dominated all the white welterweights, and that's not really what sold a lot of tickets. Eventually, it became obvious that Ray Robinson was getting the shaft, and the public pressure built, and eventually he was allowed to fight Tommy Bell for the vacant title.
During the fight, Bell in fact knocked him down, knocked Ray right on his nose. But Ray got up and won the decision, and now he was the welterweight champion, and he kept going from there.
6 years after turning pro, Ray is finally the world champion in 1946. From there on, the problem was finding suitable challengers.
Jimmy Doyle was a very good fighter out of Cleveland, and it was a big fight in Cleveland because Doyle was a big draw in Cleveland.
The night before the fight with him, I dreamed in my sleep that I knocked him out and he died in the ring. And I got up that morning and I told the commission that I wasn't going to fight.
Two religious men were brought in to speak to him and say, Ray, this is obviously just a dream. But it turned out it was a prescient dream because he killed Doyle with a single left hook.
He knocked Doyle out, and Doyle died. A few days later, there was a coroner's inquest. There were a lot of headlines. Robinson under probe and death of fighter.
And the DA said to Robinson, "When did you know you had him in trouble?" And Ray says, "When he signed the contract, I knew I had him in trouble. It's my business to have him in trouble."
His mother was convinced for the rest of her life that this had a profound impact on him as a fighter, and that mentally he was no longer the same. Ray would say to her often, "I didn't mean it, Ma. I didn't mean it."
I think it's hard to overestimate the impact killing Jimmy Doyle had on Robinson. If he went into the Doyle fight with a reserve about boxing as an avocation, I think he came out of it really disliking it, knowing he was a genius at it, but not getting any pleasure out of it.
You give me the impression that you rather enjoy your work, is that right?
No, just the opposite, Ed. I've never enjoyed boxing. It's just a business with me, and I guess I know I've never enjoyed it.
He just did it for the money. So they get you out of the situation that you're in, stop your mother from working, poverty, better things of life. So that's what he did it for.
When he went on his famous European tour in 1950, he took 9 people with him and 53 pieces of luggage. And as he was boarding the Liberty, which was the name of the steamship that was to carry him to Europe, one of the stewards said, "Ray Robinson and his entourage." And he thought, boy, that's a pretty neat word. So he started using it himself.
Now, Robinson didn't tour like the average fighter because he wasn't the average fighter. He was boxing royalty, and he saw himself as a king. The entourage consisted of a chauffeur, a valet, his personal golf pro, a barber, even a court jester to keep him in a good mood.
Ray, when he was in Europe on the tour, he had 5 fights in 29 days, and he won them all, 4 of them by knockout.
He was paid $50,000, and he had to spend all $50,000 to subsidize his entourage.
He loved people around him, and when they weren't there, he was depressed. When they were, of course, he was elated.
I don't think that he was necessarily lonely. I think that the entourage gave a little bit more credence to his ego. And God, he had an ego.
This guy was truly an artist. I mean, he was a true artist, and one always associates a vast menu of tics and phobias and eccentricities with an artist.
For example, he had a house in the Bronx. The most important part of that house was the wiring that he had so that he could hear everything that went on in every room. That was Ray, just very, very unusual.
I can't tell you how many meetings I went to with Ray on the 14th floor and the 12th floor where we walked because he wouldn't ride an elevator. He'd fight anybody. He'd get on an airplane. He would not ride in an elevator.
And he called everybody by their nicknames. Never would call them by their name.
My name was Neck, N-E-C-K. I had a skinny neck. My sister's name was Lard, L-A-R-D, because she was fat.
He always called me Henry, and my name is not Henry.
George Gainford, who was his manager, he called him the Emperor, and he called me Sarge. That's the nickname he called me.
He'd say, "Sarge, go get this for me," or "Go bring the car around the corner for me, Sarge."
I'd never seen such a gorgeous car. It was pink with little, like, gold dots in it. What a car that was. And I said, I got to get me one of them.
I saw him one night driving down Broadway, and he was waving, driving the car and waving at 43rd Street and 44th Street, and people were screaming from the sidewalk at him.
If that car moved anywhere on any avenue, everybody stopped. It stopped traffic. People stopped, they gaped and looked, and then everybody would say, "Oh, that's Sugar Ray Robinson, that's Sugar Ray Robinson."
After having 5 fights with Jake LaMotta, who was still the middleweight champion of the world in 1951, Ray signed a contract to fight Jake for the title.
Going into the